The room is silent except for the steady hum of a decoding machine, its wheels clicking like a heartbeat in the dark. Cigarette smoke curls toward the ceiling, mixing with a tension so thick it feels like the walls themselves are waiting. A young American codebreaker leans over his desk, eyes locked on a string of Japanese characters that make no sense, until suddenly, they do. His hand freezes, his breath catches. Hidden in those lines of encrypted text lies something far greater than a simple troop movement. It is a shadow, a whisper of a storm about to descend on the Pacific. He knows that if he is right, thousands of lives hang in the balance. But if he is wrong, America might be chasing ghosts while the real enemy closes in from the sea. The generals are waiting, the president is waiting, and the entire fate of the war in the Pacific could turn on this one discovery. Imagine yourself standing there, hearing the whisper of paper, the scratch of a pencil, and realizing you are holding the key to unlocking Japan's darkest secret, a secret invasion plan that could change the course of World War II forever. What deadly secret was hidden inside Japan's messages? The year is 1941. The Pacific is deceptively calm, the blue waters stretching endlessly like an innocent veil hiding a predator beneath. You would never know, standing on the deck of an American cruiser or walking the streets of Honolulu, that half a world away, men in Tokyo are plotting something that could set the ocean itself on fire. But the Americans do not see the war clouds forming. They hear only whispers carried on the crackling static of intercepted radio transmissions. Strange, coded fragments. Numbers. Syllables. Phrases that seem ordinary but somehow are not. Now, imagine yourself inside a cramped naval intelligence station in Pearl Harbor. The air is heavy with the constant clicking of typewriters, the metallic chatter of telegraphs, and the restless pacing of officers who know something is coming but cannot yet name it. On one desk sits a pile of intercepted Japanese diplomatic messages, sealed tight in the invisible armor of ciphers. The Japanese call it Purple, their most advanced encryption system. To them, it is unbreakable, a wall of steel around their intentions. To the Americans, it is a maddening puzzle that might hold the key to survival. The room belongs to a handful of young men and women, cryptanalysts, mathematicians, linguists, working under immense pressure. Some are barely older than college graduates, recruited for their brilliance with numbers and languages, but now thrown into the heart of a war they cannot see, only hear. They are called codebreakers, but among themselves, they are simply ghosts in the shadows. They will never carry rifles or storm beaches, yet their weapons are sharper than steel. Every intercepted message is a potential bullet stopped before it is fired. Every decoded phrase could mean the difference between life and death for sailors who have no idea their fates hang in the balance of ink and paper. In Washington, the Office of Naval Intelligence and the Army's Signal Intelligence Service are racing against time. The Japanese Empire, ruthless and relentless, has already crushed parts of China, occupied French Indochina, and spread its shadow across the Pacific Islands. American leaders know war is inevitable. They just don't know where the first blow will fall. Will it be the Philippines? Guam? Midway? Or perhaps even the Hawaiian Islands themselves? That uncertainty gnaws at the men decoding Japan's secrets. Late at night, when the building grows quiet, one can almost hear the unspoken dread. What if the enemy has already chosen the battlefield, and America is too blind to see it? And then, something strange begins to emerge. One codebreaker notices patterns in the purple messages. Repeated phrases, repeated times of transmission, as though the Japanese are preparing something coordinated. The mathematicians compare frequency counts, running them through primitive machines that whir and groan like beasts of burden. Slowly, painfully, the words begin to reveal themselves. Not all of them, never enough to form a complete picture, but fragments. South Seas. Operations. Units in motion. These are not the phrases of peace. These are the footprints of an army about to march. Still, the generals demand certainty. President Roosevelt demands certainty. You cannot build strategy on fragments, they argue. You cannot send fleets into unknown waters chasing shadows. But the codebreakers know the fragments are real. They can feel the pulse of invasion in the very rhythm of the messages. Now picture this. You are a young naval officer, holding in your hands a decoded line suggesting Japan is moving forces toward the Pacific Islands. Your superiors glance at it, frown, and file it away. Not enough proof, they say. And yet, you cannot sleep. You see it every time you close your eyes. You wonder, are you reading the future, or are you imagining ghosts in the numbers? But the ghosts are real. Across the Pacific, Japanese war planners are finalizing Operation Z, the strike against Pearl Harbor, and simultaneously preparing another deadly thrust, the invasion of Southeast Asia and the Philippines. To them, America must be crippled, neutralized, shocked into paralysis. They believe their secret is safe. But already, hidden behind rows of decoding machines in darkened rooms, American codebreakers are pulling back the curtain, letter by letter. The drama now shifts to a small, isolated outpost, Station HYPO, in Pearl Harbor, led by Commander Joseph Rockefort. His team is exhausted, surviving on coffee, cigarettes, and sheer obsession. Rockefort himself often works in slippers and a smoking jacket, his eccentric appearance masking a razor-sharp intellect. He is convinced that Japan is preparing a strike, but he cannot yet prove the target. His men intercept weather reports, logistics chatter, and naval orders disguised in code. They notice ships vanishing from sight, entire fleets going radio silent. Silence itself becomes a signal, an omen. It is like trying to hear footsteps in the middle of a thunderstorm. The Japanese fleet is already moving, engines roaring across the Pacific, but to the Americans, they are shadows. And then, one night, a chilling clue emerges. A message, decrypted partially, mentioning X-Day and objective points. The room falls into silence. Every man and woman in that room understands. Japan has chosen its time. Japan has chosen its place. But where? The codebreakers work feverishly, sweat dripping, pencils snapping, machines jamming from overuse. Every intercepted syllable is dragged into the light. The hours bleed into days, the days into weeks. The invasion is coming closer. Somewhere out there, Japanese soldiers are sharpening bayonets, checking rifles, whispering prayers to their emperor. Somewhere, ships are slicing across the waves. And here, in this hidden room, America's last chance lies not in battleships, not in bombers, but in the fragile hope that human minds can outpace a machine-built cipher. And then comes the chilling realization. America has cracked enough to know an invasion is coming. They have not cracked enough to know where. The room grows heavy with doubt. Is it Manila? Is it Singapore? Or is it the unthinkable Pearl Harbor itself? The answer is hidden inside the next coded message, waiting to be dragged into the light. But will it be discovered in time, or too late? Did America hear the warnings before the storm? Imagine the night before disaster. The Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly in darkness, a black canvas hiding the silhouettes of warships cutting silently toward their prey. Engines hum beneath the waves, pilots whisper final prayers in cockpits, and sailors sharpen their resolve for what is to come. Thousands of miles away, in Washington and Pearl Harbor, a different kind of battle rages. Not with torpedoes and bullets, but with pencils, typewriters, and fragile strips of intercepted code. The question is simple, yet terrifying. Did America know what was about to happen? And if so, why did no one stop it? The truth begins with fragments. Throughout late 1941, American codebreakers were intercepting and decoding Japanese messages with growing urgency. Each breakthrough carried the weight of prophecy. They had cracked much of Japan's diplomatic code, known as Purple, allowing them to peer into Tokyo's communications with its embassies around the world. What they saw unsettled them. Orders to diplomats to burn codebooks. Sudden silences from naval outposts. Cryptic references to X-Day. It was as if the Japanese were preparing for some irreversible leap, and their diplomats were tying off loose ends before the plunge. But here is the cruel twist of history. The Americans could read Japan's diplomatic language more clearly than its naval code. They could glimpse intention but not position. They knew war was certain, but they could not see where the hammer would fall. It was like hearing the footsteps of a killer in the hallway, yet not knowing which door he would open. Inside Pearl Harbor Station HYPO, Commander Joseph Rockefort and his team fought exhaustion as they pieced together fragments of Japanese naval communications. Rockefort, eccentric and brilliant, often appeared in a tattered smoking jacket and slippers, his appearance belying his ferocious mind. His analysts charted ship movements, tracked unusual silence in Japanese fleet communications, and saw something chilling. Major units of the Imperial Navy had vanished from sight. Entire fleets, once chatter-filled, went radio dark. Silence, they realized, was itself a signal. The Japanese were on the move, and secrecy this total could only mean one thing, a strike of unprecedented scale. But against Rockefort's urgency stood the heavy wall of bureaucracy. Washington, cautious and political, weighed every fragment of evidence with cold skepticism. Military leaders debated possibilities. The Philippines? Thailand? Singapore? Guam? Few believed that Japan would dare to strike Hawaii itself. The idea was considered reckless, suicidal even. To them, Pearl Harbor was a fortress, and Japan would never risk awakening the full fury of America. Still, the Codebreakers pressed on. On December 6, 1941, as dusk settled over Washington, one final diplomatic message was decoded. It was Japan's reply to American demands to withdraw from China and Indochina. The message was cold, final, and absolute. Japan would not retreat. War was inevitable. Yet the Codebreakers saw something more terrifying. Tokyo had instructed its Washington embassy to deliver the message at a precise time. 1 p.m. Washington, D.C. time, December 7th. For the Americans reading it, that precision was a thunderclap. Japan was synchronizing diplomacy with something else, something about to happen in the Pacific. Imagine being the officer holding that decoded message. The embassy is ordered to deliver it at 1 p.m., but why? What is happening at that exact moment across the ocean? Your hands tremble as you realize the obvious. The time difference means 7:30 a.m. in Hawaii. That's when the Japanese will strike. But who will believe you? The message doesn't name Pearl Harbor. It doesn't point to Hawaii. It only hints, suggests, implies. You rush to pass it up the chain. Midnight turns to dawn. The clock is running out. And out at sea, the Japanese strike force, the Kido Butai, plows toward Oahu. 6 carriers, more than 400 planes, destroyers, submarines. It is the most powerful naval task force ever assembled, gliding unseen through the waves, its radios sealed in silence, its pilots briefed in secrecy. They are ghosts on the ocean, coming closer with every hour. Inside the War Department in Washington, officers pace, argue, debate. General George Marshall, America's Army Chief of Staff, receives the decoded message early on the morning of December 7th. He immediately recognizes the danger. But fate intervenes cruelly. He cannot reach Hawaii quickly. He sends a warning, but it goes by commercial telegraph, not secure military lines. It crawls through the system, delayed at every step. By the time the warning reaches Pearl Harbor, Japanese planes are already in the sky. Picture yourself in Hawaii that morning. The sun is rising, painting the harbor gold. Sailors line the decks of battleships, enjoying the stillness of a Sunday morning. Some are writing letters home, others preparing for church, others still asleep in hammocks. They do not hear the warning that Washington tried to send. They do not know that 230 miles to the north, Japanese pilots are climbing into their cockpits, engines roaring, the rising sun painted on their wings. Back in the decoding rooms, the Americans sense what is happening but cannot stop it. A radio operator in Hawaii picks up unusual chatter. He reports it. No one listens. An Army radar operator on Oahu sees a massive formation of planes on his screen that morning. He calls it in. His superior dismisses it. Don't worry. Probably a flight of B-17s from the mainland. Minutes later, the bombs begin to fall. At 7:48 a.m., the first wave of Japanese planes descends on Pearl Harbor, dropping torpedoes and bombs onto unsuspecting battleships. The harbor erupts in fire and smoke. Sailors scramble for their lives as ships explode beneath them. The USS Arizona takes a direct hit. Her forward magazine detonates in a blinding flash, killing more than 1,000 men instantly. Black smoke coils into the sky, visible for miles. The ocean itself seems to boil with fire and steel. Inside the intelligence rooms, officers sit in stunned silence. The codebreakers had sensed it, almost touched it. But they had not been heard in time. What they feared most has come true. Japan's hidden invasion plan has become a reality, unleashed in the most devastating surprise attack in American history. The aftermath is chaos. The Pacific Fleet lies crippled, battleships burning in the harbor, hundreds of aircraft destroyed on the ground. More than 2,400 Americans are dead. The invasion plan, so carefully hidden in coded fragments, has burst into the open with fire and blood. And as the smoke clears, one haunting question hangs in the air. If America's codebreakers had seen it coming, why wasn't anyone listening? The answer is complicated, buried in politics, disbelief, and the arrogance of leaders who could not imagine such a daring strike. But one truth is undeniable. The codebreakers were right. They saw the storm forming. They whispered the warnings. And still, the bombs fell. But even in the ruins of Pearl Harbor, a new chapter begins. The codebreakers, though shaken, are not defeated. Their war is only beginning. If Japan could surprise America once, they reason, it will try again. And next time, the warning must be louder, clearer, impossible to ignore. Could the next attack be stopped before it began? The flames of Pearl Harbor had barely cooled when a new fear gripped America. If Japan had managed to strike so suddenly, so decisively, what else were they planning? Would they march across the Pacific unchecked, swallowing islands and territories one after another? Or would the codebreakers, haunted by their near miss, finally piece together enough of the enemy's secrets to prevent the next catastrophe? In the smoldering aftermath of December 7th, the United States reeled. Battleships lay broken, planes reduced to twisted wreckage, and families wept for sons who would never return home. Yet amid the grief and fury, the war of shadows did not stop, it intensified. Deep in naval intelligence bunkers, a race began. America could not afford another surprise. Every intercepted message, every flicker of Japanese communication, became a lifeline to survival. It was here, in this crucible of urgency, that the focus shifted to Japan's naval code, known to the Americans as JN-25. Unlike the purple code used by diplomats, JN-25 was the heartbeat of the Imperial Navy itself. It directed fleets, coordinated invasions, and carried the orders of admirals who believed their ciphers unbreakable. For the codebreakers, cracking JN-25 was like staring at a mountain with no summit in sight. Thousands of meaningless numbers arranged in endless streams, each hiding intent beneath layers of complexity. Imagine sitting at one of those desks. The room is lit only by the harsh glow of desk lamps, the air thick with tobacco smoke and fatigue. Piles of intercepted messages tower around you, each a string of digits that mean nothing until they mean everything. Your pencil scratches across paper, trying to find patterns where there appear to be none. Hours stretch into days, days into weeks. Most messages remain stubbornly impenetrable. Yet sometimes, just sometimes, a breakthrough comes, a repeated number, a familiar sequence, a phrase you've seen before. In those moments, the room erupts with hope. Because even one cracked message can mean the difference between life and death for thousands. And hope was needed, because Japan was not finished. While Americans mourned at Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces surged across the Pacific. They struck the Philippines, forcing General Douglas MacArthur's men into a desperate retreat. They invaded Malaya, threatening Singapore, Britain's jewel in the east. They poured into the Dutch East Indies, hungry for oil and resources. One island after another fell, each conquest fueled by secrecy and coordination hidden inside JN-25. To the Allies, it seemed as if the Japanese were everywhere at once, unstoppable, unbeatable. But the Codebreakers knew better. They knew that behind the mask of invincibility, Japan's plans were fragile. If those plans were uncovered, the Empire's moves could be predicted and countered. Station HYPO in Pearl Harbor and its counterpart in Melbourne, Australia, became hives of activity. Teams of mathematicians, linguists, and analysts worked tirelessly, often without sleep. Commander Rockefort, eccentric as ever, rallied his men with a mix of humor and intensity. His mantra was simple: every message is a weapon. Find it. Use it. And slowly, the walls of JN-25 began to crack. At first, the breakthroughs were small. A decoded fragment revealed supply convoys moving toward Rabaul. Another hinted at Japanese forces preparing for operations in Burma. Each piece, tiny on its own, became part of a larger mosaic. By early 1942, the Allies were beginning to anticipate Japanese moves, not always perfectly, but enough to buy time, to save lives, to fight back. Yet the greatest test was still to come. Because buried deep in JN-25 lay the blueprint for Japan's most ambitious gambit since Pearl Harbor. A plan to lure America into a trap, to finish the job begun on December 7th, to crush the Pacific Fleet once and for all. This was no ordinary operation. The Japanese called the target AF. To them, it was the keystone of American defense in the Pacific. If AF fell, Japan could dominate the ocean, threaten Hawaii itself, and force America to negotiate. But what exactly was AF? The Codebreakers had to know. Night after night, Rockefort's team pored over intercepts. Messages spoke of reinforcements heading to AF, of supply lines stretching toward it, of carrier forces preparing for the decisive strike. But nowhere did the Japanese name the place. It was hidden behind those two simple letters, AF. Was it Hawaii again? Samoa? Fiji? Or somewhere else entirely? The tension was unbearable. Washington wanted answers. The Pacific Fleet needed to know where to fight. And then, in one of the most ingenious moves in the history of code-breaking, Rockefort devised a plan. He convinced commanders at Midway Island, a small, isolated atoll northwest of Hawaii, to send out an unencrypted radio message reporting a breakdown in their water purification system. The message was bait, plain and simple. If Japan truly meant to strike Midway, they would repeat the water shortage report in their coded messages. Days later, the intercept came in. The Japanese reported that AF is short of water. Rockefort's gamble had paid off. AF was Midway. Imagine the rush of adrenaline in that moment. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, America was not the hunted, it was the hunter. The Codebreakers had peeled back the veil of secrecy, exposing Japan's grand plan before it could unfold. Now, Admiral Chester Nimitz could prepare. Now, the Pacific Fleet could meet the enemy not with surprise, but with anticipation. But even with the knowledge, the danger was immense. The Japanese fleet was vast, their carriers powerful, their pilots experienced. Midway would be a battle not of numbers, but of information, of who knew more, who struck first, who trusted their intelligence. And it was the Codebreakers, the ghosts in the shadows, who handed America its chance. Picture Nimitz receiving the report. His eyes narrow as he reads the decoded intercepts, his mind already racing. Japan will strike Midway. The date is set. The carriers are moving. He knows the risk, knows that one wrong move could doom the fleet. Yet for the first time, the Americans are armed with foreknowledge. For the first time, the enemy's secrecy has been pierced. The fate of the Pacific now turns on this revelation. But will the Codebreakers' discovery be enough to win the coming battle? Or will Japan's power overwhelm even the advantage of foresight? The answer lies just beyond the horizon, where carriers gather, pilots prepare, and the ocean waits to decide the outcome of one of history's greatest naval battles. Could foreknowledge alone win the Battle of Midway? Dawn breaks over the endless Pacific, and for a moment, the ocean is still. The horizon stretches in every direction, a serene emptiness hiding the most dangerous armada the world has ever known. But beneath this calm surface lies a storm unlike any before. The Japanese fleet, massive, disciplined, and seemingly unstoppable, moves toward Midway with confidence born of victory after victory. Their admirals believe the Americans are broken, their fleet crippled, their spirit shaken. They cannot imagine that their grand plan has already been uncovered, their every move shadowed by unseen eyes. And yet, thanks to the Codebreakers of Station HYPO, that is exactly what has happened. The question now, the one burning in the minds of sailors and commanders alike, is simple. Could foreknowledge alone be enough to change the fate of a battle? The stage was set in June 1942. Barely 6 months had passed since Pearl Harbor, and the scars of that disaster were still raw. Battleships remained twisted hulks in the harbor, families still mourned their dead, and America's naval power seemed shattered. But from those ruins had risen determination, and with it, the resolve of Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. With the intelligence gathered by Rockefort and his Codebreakers, Nimitz understood something that Japan did not. The trap meant for America would instead ensnare the hunters themselves. Imagine standing on the deck of the USS Enterprise in early June, the salty wind in your face, the smell of fuel and steel all around. Pilots move nervously across the deck, checking planes, whispering prayers, gripping photographs of loved ones. They know the coming hours will decide not only their lives, but perhaps the very future of the war. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, are preparing their own strike. But unlike Pearl Harbor, this time America is waiting. On June 3rd, American patrol aircraft spot elements of the Japanese invasion force approaching Midway. The sighting confirms what the Codebreakers had already revealed. Messages flash across the fleet, and the tension rises like electricity in the air before a thunderstorm. The Americans know what is coming, but knowledge alone cannot stop bombs, cannot block torpedoes, cannot guarantee survival. Now, the test of steel and blood will begin. June 4th arrives. The sun rises over Midway, casting its golden light on the small atoll that suddenly feels like the center of the universe. On the island, Marine defenders brace themselves, clutching rifles and manning anti-aircraft guns. At sea, American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown, prepare their air groups for launch. The Japanese, unaware that their codes have betrayed them, begin their assault as planned. The first wave of Japanese aircraft roars over Midway, unleashing bombs that shatter runways and set fuel depots ablaze. The defenders fight fiercely, anti-aircraft guns thundering, smoke and fire engulfing the island. From the airfields, American pilots scramble to intercept, their outdated planes thrown into combat against experienced Japanese veterans. Many never return. Those who do carry stories of courage and sacrifice etched into their faces. But as the Japanese pilots regroup, they send back a message that will shape the course of the battle. Midway has been damaged, but not destroyed. A second strike is needed. This moment is critical. On the Japanese carriers, decks are loaded with bombs prepared for another assault on Midway. But then comes the dilemma. Reports arrive of American ships in the area. Should they rearm their planes with torpedoes for naval combat? Or should they continue preparing bombs for a second strike on the island? Admiral Nagumo, commanding the Japanese fleet, hesitates. His decision stretches minutes into eternity. Planes are rolled back and forth on carrier decks, bombs removed, torpedoes brought out, confusion spreading like wildfire. And in that hesitation lies the seed of disaster. Because while Nagumo struggles, the Americans are moving. Guided by the intelligence of the Codebreakers, Nimitz has positioned his carriers perfectly. Waves of American torpedo bombers launch in desperate attacks, flying low across the ocean surface, engines straining, hearts pounding. One by one, they fall to the guns of Japanese fighters and the deadly curtain of anti-aircraft fire. Entire squadrons are wiped out. Cockpits shatter, planes erupt into flames, men crash screaming into the sea. From the decks of Japanese carriers, it looks like American desperation, like futility. But fate is not finished. As the torpedo bombers die buying time, another wave arrives. High above, American dive bombers, slow, methodical, patient, have found their moment. With Japanese fighters pulled low to intercept torpedo planes, the skies above the fleet are suddenly open. From 14,000 feet, dive bombers tilt their noses downward, engines howling as they plummet like hawks toward their prey. Bomb bays open, and steel death drops onto the decks below. At 10:22 a.m., the sky itself seems to explode. The USS Enterprise's dive bombers score direct hits on Kaga and Akagi, flames racing across their decks. Moments later, the USS Yorktown's planes strike Soryu, tearing her apart. In less than 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers, the pride of the Imperial Navy, are engulfed in fire and ruin. Explosions rock the ocean, smoke towers into the sky, sailors hurl themselves into the flames or the sea. Admirals who believed themselves invincible watch their fleets die before their eyes. Imagine being there, hearing the screams, feeling the shock waves, smelling the acrid smoke of burning steel and fuel. In that instant, the tide of the Pacific War shifts. Pearl Harbor is avenged, not in words, but in fire. Yet the battle is not over. The Japanese carrier Hiryu survives the morning's inferno, her crew fighting with desperate resolve. She launches counterstrikes that find the USS Yorktown, hitting her with bombs and torpedoes. The Yorktown lists, smoke pouring from her wounds. But the Americans do not break. Dive bombers from Enterprise and Hornet retaliate, finding Hiryu and setting her ablaze. By nightfall, all 4 Japanese carriers are gone, sinking into the Pacific with thousands of sailors and their dreams of conquest. For Japan, Midway is a catastrophe. The core of their carrier force, built over years, trained to perfection, is annihilated in a single day. For America, it is a miracle of intelligence, courage, and sacrifice. The Codebreakers' discovery of Midway as AF, the foreknowledge of the Japanese plan, gave Nimitz the chance to strike. The pilots and sailors, brave beyond measure, seized that chance and turned it into victory. But as celebrations echoed across the Pacific Fleet, the Codebreakers themselves returned to their desks. There would be no parades for them, no medals pinned in public. Their work remained secret, their victories whispered in classified files. They knew only that their war was not over. Japan was wounded, but not defeated. Other codes, other plans, other invasions waited in the shadows. And only by staying one step ahead, by dragging every secret into the light, could America hope to survive. What other secrets were hidden in Japan's codes? The ocean was vast, the war far from over, and though the flames of Midway still smoldered in memory, the Japanese Empire remained a formidable beast. 4 carriers lay at the bottom of the Pacific, but Japan still held vast territories: Burma, the Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies. Their armies stretched across Asia, their war machine hungry for resources, their spirit unbroken. Victory at Midway had shifted momentum, but it had not ended the war. The question now haunted every codebreaker hunched over papers and intercepts in dim-lit rooms. What other secrets were the Japanese hiding, and could they be uncovered before more American blood was spilled? The shadow war of intelligence did not end with Midway. In many ways, it deepened. Station HYPO and its sister stations across the Pacific worked tirelessly, intercepting, cataloging, deciphering. The Japanese had altered their ciphers, complicating JN-25 with new codebooks and additives. It was a cruel cat-and-mouse game. Every time the Americans cracked a system, the Japanese shifted it again. And yet, the persistence of the codebreakers was unshakable. They lived in a world of fragments, chasing meaning through incomplete lines, half-decrypted orders, and the constant hum of intercepted transmissions. Imagine being there, late at night in Pearl Harbor, months after Midway. The harbor still holds the skeletons of battleships struck down on December 7th. The stench of oil lingers in the water. And in a small building not far away, men and women pore over pages of numbers and characters, their eyes bloodshot, their hands trembling with fatigue. They know that while soldiers fight with rifles and pilots with bombs, their battlefield is here, in silence and paper. And their weapons are the discoveries hidden inside Japan's encrypted words. One of the next great revelations came in 1942 as the Americans began deciphering Japan's plans for the Solomon Islands. Guadalcanal, a small, jungle-choked island barely known to most Americans, became the center of Japanese construction. A new airfield was being built, an airfield that could cut supply lines between the United States and Australia, a vital lifeline in the Pacific War. It was the codebreakers who confirmed what aerial reconnaissance only hinted, that Japan intended to make Guadalcanal a fortress, a dagger pointed at the heart of Allied strategy. Without their warnings, the island might have fallen quietly into Japan's grasp. Instead, America launched its first major offensive of the war there in August 1942, beginning one of the bloodiest campaigns of the Pacific. Picture the Marines landing on Guadalcanal, faces smeared with sweat and mud, rifles clutched tight, their boots sinking into sand that would soon be soaked in blood. They did not know it then, but behind them stood the invisible shield of codebreakers who had made the invasion possible. They fought in jungle ambushes, starved in foxholes, endured endless nights of bombardment, but they held. And as the months wore on, the Japanese, unable to resupply and unable to surprise, were forced to withdraw. The unsinkable aircraft carrier they had dreamed of in Guadalcanal was lost to them. But the codebreakers' war was relentless. They tracked Japanese supply convoys known as the Tokyo Express, revealing routes and timetables that allowed American submarines to ambush and strangle Japan's lifelines. They uncovered hints of reinforcements bound for New Guinea, allowing MacArthur to prepare his island-hopping campaign. They exposed the vulnerabilities in Japan's defense perimeter, places where the empire was stretched too thin, places where America could strike hardest. And then came one of the most shocking secrets of all. In April 1943, American codebreakers intercepted a message detailing the travel plans of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the very architect of Pearl Harbor, the man who had once warned Japan's leaders that he could run wild for 6 months but no longer. The message was precise. Yamamoto would fly to inspect Japanese bases in the Solomon Islands, his route, his time of departure, his escort, all laid out. The revelation sent shockwaves through American command. Here was an opportunity unlike any other. To strike down Yamamoto would be to cut off the head of the Japanese Navy, to avenge Pearl Harbor in flesh and blood. But it was also a gamble. If the Japanese ever learned their codes had been broken, they would change them, and the codebreakers' advantage might vanish. After intense debate, the order was given. On April 18, 1943, American P-38 Lightning fighters launched from Guadalcanal, flying a 400-mile mission into hostile skies. They intercepted Yamamoto's plane with precision born of intelligence, riddling it with bullets until it spiraled into the jungle below. The mastermind of Pearl Harbor was dead, struck down not by chance, but by the hands of codebreakers who had turned his own secrecy against him. Imagine the quiet in that decoding room when the report came back. No cheers, no victory shouts. Only a grim satisfaction that their war in shadows had claimed its most famous prize. They knew the Japanese would mourn, they knew propaganda would rage, but they also knew something deeper, that the empire's strength was cracking, its leaders vulnerable, its secrets bleeding into American hands. From then on, the tide of the Pacific War accelerated. Codebreakers continued to unravel Japanese moves at Leyte, at the Philippine Sea, at Iwo Jima. By the time of Okinawa, their knowledge was so vast, their intercepts so precise, that American commanders often knew Japan's intentions before Japanese field officers did. The silent war had become a torrent, a relentless dismantling of the empire's hidden designs. And yet, for all their victories, the codebreakers remained in the shadows. Few outside the highest command knew the extent of their contributions. Sailors, soldiers, and marines bled on beaches, stormed ridges, fought hand-to-hand in jungles, never realizing that the reason they were not surprised, the reason reinforcements were intercepted, the reason victory was possible, was because of quiet men and women with pencils, paper, and brilliant, unyielding minds. By 1945, when Japan lay in ruins and the war reached its fiery conclusion, the story of the codebreakers was still untold. Their discoveries had shaped strategy, saved fleets, toppled commanders, and opened doors to victory, but they could not speak of it. 4 years after the war, their silence continued, their heroism hidden behind the veil of secrecy. Only later, when declassification lifted the shadows, would the world learn how deeply America's fate had been tied to those rooms filled with smoke, sweat, and endless strings of numbers. So, when we look back at the Pacific War, we see Pearl Harbor's devastation, Midway's turning point, Guadalcanal's brutal struggle, Yamamoto's downfall, and the final march to victory. But woven through all of it is the invisible thread of code-breaking, the ghostly hand that steered events from behind the curtain. Without them, the Pacific might have remained a graveyard of American hopes. With them, the tide was turned, the empire undone, and history rewritten.